Tonight on ABC News Live Prime, the Justice Department's criminal probe into Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell. The Fed chair, long one of President Trump's top targets, now under fire by the Department of Justice. Trump often makes threats to fire Powell while pressuring the Fed to lower interest rates. Powell makes a rare public statement calling the criminal investigation unprecedented. Republicans who are now coming to his defense. Disturbing images are coming in from Iran tonight. A bloody crackdown against protesters. More than 500 demonstrators reportedly killed. Now, President Trump's new threat to attack Iran and Iran's warning for America. An arson suspect allegedly confesses to setting fire to a synagogue, the oldest synagogue in Mississippi. What the FBI is saying about that suspect tonight. The Supreme Court is set to hear a case for the first time that will ultimately decide whether trans athletes can participate in girls' sports. We sit down with the teen at the center of it all, and the Attorney General looking to stop her from playing with the girls.
Why not just play with the boys' team?
Because it would go against who I am.
If boys are allowed to play in girls' sports, what we know is they will take the place of biological females on these teams.
From incredible comebacks to disappointing fourth quarters, Herm Edwards is here to recap the wild weekend of NFL playoff games as we look ahead to tonight's matchup.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is Prime with Lindsay Davis.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We begin this busy Monday night with developing news out of Minneapolis just days after that deadly ICE shooting. Tonight, Minnesota has filed a lawsuit to get ICE out of the state. It comes as Homeland Security is now sending hundreds more federal agents there. Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the state of Minnesota are all suing to block Homeland Security from moving forward with that surge. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey tonight said, quote, "At times there are as many as 50 agents arresting one person. The scale is wildly disproportionate, and it has nothing to do with keeping people safe." This comes as tensions flare in Minnesota and across the country after those graphic images, that mother of three, Renee Good, behind the wheel of her SUV, an agent shooting her 3 times, hitting her in the head. The Trump administration has defended that agent and says more are needed. Meanwhile, all of this is happening as the Justice Department is taking unprecedented aim at Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell. We'll have team coverage of that in a moment. But first, our Faith Abube leads us off from Minneapolis with the late-breaking developments.
Tonight, with growing protests in Minneapolis and around the country over ICE agent Jonathan Ross shooting and killing Renee Good, the Department of Homeland Security is responding by surging hundreds more ICE and other federal agents to Minneapolis as operations continue across the city. In a residential neighborhood just blocks from where Renee Good was killed, agents firing tear gas today to disperse protesters away from the scene of a car crash involving immigration officers.
This has to stop. It just has to stop.
Today, the state of Minnesota and the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul announcing they're suing DHS, calling the surge of agents a federal invasion.
We are not asking ICE not to do ICE things. We are asking this federal government to stop the unconstitutional conduct that is invading our streets each and every day. You've seen the videos. At times, there are as many as 50 agents arresting one person. The scale is wildly disproportionate and has nothing to do with keeping people safe.
In the hours after Renee Good was killed, the Trump administration declared the incident a case of domestic terrorism. Today, the White House press secretary continuing to defend ICE's actions, calling Renee Good a, quote, lunatic.
This administration will continue to stand wholeheartedly by the brave men and women of ICE, including that officer in Minneapolis who was absolutely justified in using self-defense against a lunatic who was part of a group, an organized group, to interject and to impede on law enforcement operations.
A lot of disagreement about why this happened. Faith Abube joins us now. Notably, Faith, the lawsuit aims at preventing federal agents from pointing firearms at people. What can you tell us about that?
That's right, Lindsay. Specifically, people who do not pose any immediate threat of death or serious bodily harm to those agents. In the meantime, though, DHS is responding to that lawsuit, saying Minnesota officials are prioritizing politics over policy.
Faith in Minneapolis for us. Thanks so much, Faith. Tonight, there's growing backlash after the Justice Department launched a criminal investigation into Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell. But in a rare move, Powell is fighting back, accusing President Trump of trying to pressure him into lowering interest rates. Our Mary Bruce has the latest.
Tonight, the growing backlash after the Justice Department, for the first time in history, launched an investigation into the chairman of the Federal Reserve. Fed Chair Jerome Powell, in an extraordinary statement, calls the investigation part of President Trump's pressure campaign to get him to lower interest rates.
The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public, rather than following the preferences of the president.
The investigation involves Powell's testimony into the cost of building renovations at the Fed. Trump himself visiting one of the work sites over the summer, appearing to try to surprise Powell with the numbers.
This came from us?
Yes. I don't know who does that.
You're including the Martin renovation. You just added
our entire capital.
You just added in a third building is what that is. That's a third building.
Well, no, but it's a building that's being built.
No, it was built 5 years ago. We finished Martin 5 years ago.
It's part of the overall work.
But
it's
not new.
So we're going to take a look.
The president claims he doesn't know anything about the DOJ investigation, though just 2 weeks ago he said this.
We're thinking about bringing a suit against Powell for incompetence.
Tonight, Republican Senator Thom Tillis says he will block a vote on any of the president's Fed nominees until the investigation into Powell is resolved.
And what's your message to the administration?
My message isn't to the administration. My message to whoever who went after what I consider to be vindictive prosecution to grow up and give the president better advice.
Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski calls the investigation an attempt at coercion, warning if the Federal Reserve loses its independence, the stability of our markets and the broader economy will suffer.
Does the president believe that the Fed should operate independently from him?
The president has made it quite clear he thinks Jerome Powell is bad at his job.
But does he believe in the independence of the Fed, Caroline?
He has, and he said that many times.
Mary Bruce joins us now from the White House tonight. Mary, we know a statement was released by all the living former Fed chairs who served under both parties. Tell us what it said.
Well, Lindsay, in this joint statement, the former Fed chairs called the DOJ's investigation an unprecedented attempt to undermine the Fed, calling its independence and the public's perception of that independence, quote, critical for economic performance. Lindsay.
Mary Bruce for us. Thanks so much, Mary. Well, let's bring in Jared Bernstein, who served as the chair of President Biden's Council of Economic Advisors. Mr. Bernstein, thank you so much for joining us tonight. First off, just curious to get your initial reaction to such an unprecedented move, the Fed chair targeted by federal prosecutors.
Well, I think this is really a very dangerous path for Trump and the administration to go down. We can look at the history of cases where country central banks were taken over by the presidency in precisely the way Trump is trying to do here. And the results are terrible for just average, everyday working folks. If you push the interest rate down without any regard to the data or economic conditions, you get runaway inflation, and it's really hard to stop. Economies have been brought to their knees when this independence has been politicized. So it's a dangerous path to go. And I'm glad to see bipartisan pushback, recognition that it's all pretext, this business about renovation. There's no real case there. This is about Trump trying to take over the Fed. And B, again, bipartisan recognition that that's a bad idea.
As you just mentioned, and we also heard in Mary's piece, top Republicans are coming to Powell's defense. What do you think that this investigation boils down to?
Well, the investigation is just a phony claim that Chair Powell was untruthful to Congress when he was talking about the renovation. That is completely false. And, it takes a lot to get Chair Powell, to take the gloves off the way he did in the clip that you played. But when they start launching criminal investigations, they're pushing him too far. And he legitimately came out and called this what it is. Those accusations are a pretext. The president has shown time and again, which is one reason why Republicans are frustrated with him, time and again, that his ultimate goal here is to compromise the independence of the Fed, to take over interest rate policy, which history shows us unequivocally ends very badly for the economies that go down that benighted path.
For everyone who's watching at home, just in simple terms, explain why the Federal Reserve's independence is so important.
Because in periods and in countries where Federal Reserves were not independent, where politicians like Trump were able to influence them, inflation didn't just break out. It didn't just go up and come back down the way it did a few years ago. It went up and stayed up, and then it kept going up. And you had double-digit and triple-digit inflationary episodes. You need a central bank that isn't motivated by politics to sometimes put the brakes on, but politicians like President Trump, they don't either think about that, understand it, or all they're considering is politics, not economics. So it ends up really damaging incomes, the credibility of the bank, international markets in ways that redound against average families, both in terms of lower real incomes and higher real interest rates.
Today, House Speaker Mike Johnson said the Justice Department is not being weaponized, but then he went on to say that it was for 4 years under Biden-Harris. Your response to that?
Look, I mean, these folks apparently will say anything that comes into their head the minute you put a microphone in front of them. He's got no evidence to support that. When it comes to the Federal Reserve, I challenge him and anyone else who'd like to go looking for anything slightly comparable to what Trump is doing. We were very, very careful to respect Fed independence. And in fact, when I was chair of the CEA, we wrote one piece about the Federal Reserve, and it was a piece explaining why their independence is so important, using many of the facts I just shared with you.
Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it, Jared Bernstein.
My pleasure.
Despite an early dip following the news of an investigation, stocks ended up recovering and closing higher for the day, with the Dow and S&P 500 closing at record highs. For more on the market, we're joined by Elizabeth Schulze. So, Elizabeth, what can we take away from how stocks closed today, even after the news of this investigation and its implications?
Yeah, Lindsay, a record high on Wall Street today, the Dow ending higher, which is good news for investors. What investors and traders I've been talking to say is they say that this is ultimately a threat on the Federal Reserve's independence when you see what's happening with the Justice Department and this investigation into Fed Chair Jerome Powell. But they seem confident that there will be some guardrails in place because of the reaction and this quick and swift reaction we're seeing from some members of Congress saying that they won't move forward, basically approving other members to the Fed, confirming them to the Fed, until this investigation is essentially dropped.
Are there any long-term market concerns that could stem from this investigation?
When you think about the long-term concerns, Lindsay, about the Fed's independence, it is pretty significant for American households. And what the Fed thinks is best for the American economy isn't always what the White House or whoever's in control in Congress thinks is best for the American economy. You know, people want low interest rates. We want to see lower borrowing costs for our car loans, our mortgages, our credit cards. But that isn't necessarily the best course if you have high inflation and you need those higher borrowing costs to bring down prices that we pay. So that's why for decades the Fed has been independent, and that's why Fed Chair Jerome Powell is making very clear he will fight to preserve that independence in as much as he can.
All right, Elizabeth Schulze for us. Thanks so much for breaking it all down.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Now to another big story. We're following President Trump is threatening military action against Iran over the deadly crackdown against protesters there. ABC's chief foreign correspondent Ian Pannell is in the region tonight.
Tonight, the State Department now warning all Americans to get out of Iran immediately, as horrific new video captures the escalating bloodshed. Unarmed protesters simply calling for change gunned down in cold blood as the regime tightens its grip, and President Trump weighs a military response to stop the crackdown.
We're looking at it very seriously. The military is looking at it, and we're looking at some very strong options.
While Iranians wait for help, agony and grief in Tehran as desperate families search through mounting body bags to try to find their loved ones. Despite an internet blackout, a handful of chilling videos are leaking out onto social media. Human rights groups now say more than 600 people have been killed, including 9 children, more than 10,000 arrested. What began as protests over staggering inflation and a currency collapse, now on the brink of a wholesale uprising. After making threats if the regime used violence, President Trump now saying Iranian leaders called him over the weekend, claiming they want to negotiate. echoing a statement today by Iran's foreign minister who said Iran is prepared for war but ready to talk. Solidarity protests popping up across the globe and back in the US. The FBI now investigating this incident in Los Angeles after a U-Haul truck plowed into a crowd demonstrating in support of protests in Iran, injuring 2 people. Police say the truck displayed signs opposing the views of the protesters. That driver arrested and charged with reckless driving.
So many hoping that war can be averted. Ian Pannell joins us tonight. Ian, we know President Trump will be briefed at the White House tomorrow, but give us a sense of just how significant these protests are.
Yeah, I mean, these are really notable. We've seen a series of protests over the last few years, the last ones notably in 2022, which was over the death of a woman in custody. But what's different this time is that you have a cross-section of society that have joined the protest. So in the past, we've seen middle-class protests around women's issues, working-class protests, student protests. Now you have almost all sectors of society represented in what's going on in the street. You also have a regime that's been weakened partly by sanctions, partly by the Israeli and US airstrikes that took place last year, and also by the loss of its proxies. So you have a very different dynamic. But I think critical to all of this is the disastrous state of the economy. People are struggling to afford even the basics of life, like some chicken or some eggs or flour. People are struggling to get their kids to school. People are struggling to get healthcare when they need it. And it's that pressure that seems to have been the spark that has lit all these other grievances that you have in Iranian society. The question is, how much can innocent, unarmed protesters stand by and endure while the regime uses brutal and deadly force? Lindsay?
Ian Pannell, thank you. Still to come, a leading expert who's covered Iranian affairs for over a decade shares her insight amid the latest unrest and what a possible U.S. strike in the region could mean. Pope Leo XIV met with Venezuela's opposition leader and Nobel Prize laureate Maria Corina Machado at the Vatican today. Machado is touring Europe and the U.S. after she reemerged in December to accept her Nobel Peace Prize. Machado, who is in exile, asked the Pope to press for the release of political prisoners in Venezuela now that former President Nicolas Maduro is in U.S. custody. Machado is also set to meet with President Trump in D.C. on Thursday. Now to the alleged arson at a synagogue in Jackson, Mississippi. A suspect was charged today with setting fire to the historic building. Officials also released surveillance video showing a hooded figure pouring gasoline inside, as well as images of the extensive damage. ABC's Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas joins us now for more on this. Pierre, what are we learning from officials about this?
Well, Lindsay, the evidence is mounting that the attack against that historic synagogue may have been an act of pure hate. The arson was caught on surveillance. A hooded man can be seen dousing a room with gasoline. The fire caused catastrophic damage, rendering the building inoperable. An FBI affidavit lays out the arson case against Stephen Spencer Pittman, 19, who is from the area. It claims that he targeted the Beth Israel Congregation Temple because of the building's, quote, Jewish ties, and that he laughed about the attack when talking to his father, calling the building the synagogue of Satan. Lindsay, that synagogue, which serves no fewer than 13 states in the South, was bombed by the KKK in 1967, in part because it supported the civil rights movement.
And just 19 years old, Pierre Thomas for us. Our thanks to you.
Pleasure.
Arizona Senator Mark Kelly is fighting back against Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth for attempting to punish him and reducing his military retirement rank. Kelly is suing Hegseth, the Defense Department, the Secretary of the Navy, and the Navy after he was censured. He claims Hegseth's attempt to punish him for a video warning troops not to follow illegal orders violates his First Amendment rights. Kelly says his job as a U.S. Senator is to hold this or any administration accountable. And happening now, the largest nurses' strike in New York City's history. Nearly 15,000 nurses across multiple hospitals walked off the job this morning after the nurses union and hospital officials failed to reach an agreement. ABC's Rhiannon Alley has the latest.
Tonight, the largest nursing strike in New York City's history. Nearly 15,000 nurses walking off the job and onto the picket line. The union striking 3 leading hospital systems, Montefiore, Mount Sinai, and New York Presbyterian, demanding higher pay and benefits, increased staffing, and more security after a string of violent incidents at hospitals.
Make sure that we can staff our hospitals appropriately and make sure that they're putting their patients before profits.
Today, the city's new mayor, Zohran Mamdani, showing support with a visit to the picket lines.
They show up, and all they are asking for in return is dignity, respect, and the fair pay and treatment that they deserve.
The strike comes in the middle of a severe flu season, with New York hospitals reporting a record number of patients. Some hospitals now bringing in outside nurses. Mount Sinai already canceling some elective procedures.
We will be able to run safely our hospitals, our outpatient practices, but there will be changes.
Such a critical time for patients and nurses. Rhiannon Alley joins us now. Rhiannon, any sense how long this could last?
Well, Lindsay, the last nursing strike was 3 years ago, and that one lasted 3 days. So the nurses I spoke with today said that they hope this one is just a short. They were here 3 years ago. They remember that strike. They hope this one is short, but they say they are ready to stand out on the picket lines for as long as it needed to get what they say nurses deserve. Lindsay?
Rhiannon Alley for us. Thank you. A chilling turn in the killing of the dentist and his wife in Columbus, Ohio. That wife's ex-husband is now charged with their murders. How authorities ultimately tracked him down. Here's our Alex Perez.
Tonight, after a 10-day manhunt for the killer of Ohio dentist Spencer Tepe and his wife Monique, investigators now say they were shot by Monique's ex-husband. 39-year-old Michael McKee arrested, facing aggravated murder charges, appearing today in an Illinois courtroom, agreeing to be extradited to Ohio.
Your name, sir, for the record? Michael McKee.
Investigators say they tracked the ex-husband through neighborhood surveillance video, linking him to a vehicle which arrived just prior to the homicides and left shortly after. That car eventually found located 400 miles away in Rockford, Illinois. Neighbors stunned.
He did not seem like somebody that would do something like this.
Court records obtained by ABC affiliate WSYX show McKee and Monique married in 2015 and divorced in 2017, stating they were incompatible. On December 30th, his ex-wife Monique and her husband Spencer found shot and killed inside their Columbus home, a friend calling 911.
There's a body.
The couple's 4-year-old daughter and 1-year-old son found inside unharmed.
Yeah, no answer. I can hear kids inside, and I swear I think I heard one yell, but we can't get in.
The Tepe family thanking the community for their support, saying, "We trust the justice system to hold the person responsible fully accountable."
Our thanks to Alex Perez. A federal judge reversed course in the Luigi Mangione case, calling for a hearing on a backpack seized during his 2024 arrest. The hearing will focus on the steps police took when they searched Mangione's backpack in Pennsylvania. Notes and the weapon allegedly used to kill United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson were found in that bag. Mangione's lawyers want that evidence tossed out from the trial. They say the search was unlawful because police did not have a warrant. Coming up, triumphs over tragedy. The emotional moments this figure skater makes the U.S. Olympic team less than 1 year after his parents tragically died in that D.C. midair collision. Plus, the Supreme Court is set to hear a case for the first time, ultimately deciding whether trans athletes may participate in girls' sports. Our Devin Dwyer sits down with the trans teen at the center of this case in tonight's Prime Focus.
Why not just play with the boys' team?
Because it would go against who I am. I've been a girl forever, and playing on the guys' team is going backwards.
And as Iranian protests escalate, we take a look by the numbers at why these recent protests are different than any we've seen before. Welcome back, everyone. Turning back now to the unrest in Iran, while President Trump is expected to be briefed tomorrow to review possible U.S. responses to the situation there. Tonight, we take a closer look by the numbers at why these recent protests may be different than those previous bouts of unrest we've seen in Iran in the past. Nationwide protests in Iran now enter a third week since erupting December 28th. They were first triggered by months of economic hardship and the collapse of the country's real currency. Since then, though, protesters have started chanting anti-government statements. Demonstrations have since grown to reach 186 cities in all 31 provinces. That's according to data from the U.S.-based human rights activist New Agency, which relies on the work of activists in and out of the country. And the growing defiance comes as the Iranian government government blocked the internet to its population of 85 million people Thursday. A national internet blackout that's now surpassed 84 hours as of early today, according to the online monitoring group NetBlocks. At least 648 protesters have been killed, including 9 children, according to the group Iran Human Rights. Activists also report that at least 10,681 people have been arrested amid the unrest. Unverified reports suggest at least one protester is at risk of execution just days after his arrest. Irfan Soltani's family told the nonprofit group Iran Human Rights, who posted his picture, that his death sentence is to be carried out later this week. And more on those protests in Iran. I want to bring in a senior fellow at the Center for International Policy, as well as the editor and host of the Iran podcast, Nigar Mortazavi. Thank you so much for joining us. President Trump says that he's now considering military action amid what activists are calling deadly anti-government protests across the Middle Eastern country. This comes as widespread internet outages have been reported, and a new security alert from the State Department is urging Americans to leave Iran. Why are we seeing such large-scale anti-government protests across Iran? And what does that say about the strength of Iran's current regime?
Thank you for having me. Well, as you suggested, this is initially the spark of this was an austerity measure by the government, an economic move of removal of certain subsidies. But this comes on the back of years and years of political, economic, social policies that have really angered a big portion of the population, I would say majority of the Iranian people, and they've taken to the street with protests time and again. Every few years we see mass protests like this. The government uses very brutal, violent, deadly crackdown, as we're seeing this time, and the protesters are sent back home, but the grievances are not addressed. So every time the protesters come back out, we saw them in 2009, 2019, 2022, most recent, it's pent-up anger, piled up grievances on top of each other that haven't been addressed. Iranians, middle classes, working classes see their lives just getting worse and worse. And some of these scenes that we see on the street are just absolute bravery and courage, but also hopelessness, people feeling like they have nothing to lose, and they essentially put their lives on the line when they come to the street.
In a post on social media today, President Trump announced a 25% tariff on any country that does business with Iran. Will this actually deter any of Iran's allies from stepping in?
I don't think so, because even more important than tariffs, the U.S. has very severe economic sanctions targeting every major industry in Iran. Multiple sanctions even have been layered. Iran is one of the most sanctioned countries in the world, which means not only the U.S. entities and companies can't do business with Iran, but even secondary sanctions would penalize other countries and companies around the world from doing business with Iran. And actually, these sanctions do go hand in hand with the massive corruption and mismanagement of the state inside the country. And that's what's brought this economy. It's a triangle of the mismanagement, of the corruption, and severe economic sanctions. And President Trump calls it maximum pressure. So on top of this maximum pressure, I think the tariff maybe in the long term will have some impact, but I just think the actual sanctions, economic sanctions, have really helped or hurt, I would say, and delivered this economic situation that we're seeing in the country right now.
There are currently 30,000 U.S. troops deployed to the Middle East and Persian Gulf region. How do you think the international community would respond if the U.S. does end up striking Iran?
It's unclear what the U.S. option is going to be, because the U.S. track record of intervention in the Middle East in the form of regime change or bringing political change to countries is just very controversial. I know President Trump has said he doesn't want to commit boots on the ground, so we're probably not looking at a model of Iraq and Afghanistan, which he's been critical of. But I'm not sure what this is going to look like. I'd like to know, is this sort of a Libya model, sustained air bombardments? Is it going to be something like what we saw in June, the 12-day war, when Israel attacked Iran and then the U.S. joined in attacking the nuclear sites? And I'm not sure how exactly that can bring sort of better governance or democracy for the people, which is something they're demanding. So it could lead to a collapse or weakening of the regime, which could potentially, it could go many ways, positive or negative, could potentially unleash even more chaos and instability in the country and Iran, which wouldn't be bounded to Iran's borders, and it would spill over into the region, which is why many of the neighbors are also worried about the situation.
Nigar, we thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate your insight.
Thank you.
Coming up, $15 million worth of gold bars stolen. Tonight, an arrest in the heist. A former airline worker accused of masterminding what's believed to be an inside job. Plus, big news from Mattel. Autistic Barbie, the newest Barbie joining the doll line aimed at celebrating diversity and inclusion. Welcome back to Prime. Here's a look at the stories making headlines right now. The DOJ is launching a criminal investigation into Fed Chair Jerome Powell related to Powell's testimony last June about the multi-year renovation of the Federal Reserve buildings. Powell and President Trump toured the construction in July and disagreed on camera about the cost. But Powell, in a rare video message, said the probe is ultimately part of the president's pressure campaign to push him to lower interest rates. President Trump says he's now considering military action in Iran amid what activists are calling deadly anti-government protests across the Middle Eastern country. Widespread internet outages have also been reported throughout Iran. Human rights groups estimate Iran's regime has killed more than 600 protesters and arrested at least 10,000 others. A U.S. official tells ABC News the president will be briefed tomorrow to review options. Paramount Skydance escalated its hostile bid for Warner Brothers Discovery, filing a lawsuit to force engagement of their $30 per share all-cash proposal. This marks a sharp escalation after Paramount last month accused Warner Brothers Discovery boards of failing to act in the shareholders' best interest, rejecting what Paramount called a superior proposal in favor of a $72 billion deal with Netflix. Canadian authorities say one of the alleged masterminds behind the country's biggest gold heist is now in custody. Police say 6,600 gold bars worth about $15 million was stolen at the Toronto airport back in 2023. The suspect, Arsalan Shohari, is charged with theft of over $5,000, 2 counts of possession of property obtained by crime, and conspiracy to commit an indictable offense. Coming up, the trans athlete at the center of tomorrow's Supreme Court case fighting for the right to play on the girls' team. A big detour for a few astronauts, their unexpected return back to Earth. And awards season now in full swing. The Golden Globes were last night. Find out which 2 stars took home their very first trophies. Welcome back, everyone. One issue that has sharply divided the country is the participation of transgender athletes in girls' and women's sports. President Trump has tried to ban them from competition by executive order, and more than half the states have already tried to do so by passing laws. Now the Supreme Court will decide whether those efforts are unlawful and unconstitutional in a case involving a West Virginia teenager determined to play with the girls. Here's our senior Washington correspondent, Devin Dwyer.
With each throw of the discus, Becky Pepper Jackson strives for perfection.
I put time in over the summer and after practices, just trying to improve my technique and get better.
The high school sophomore from Bridgeport, West Virginia, was born into a family of runners. Consistently at the back of the pack, a coach instead pushed her to learn to throw.
My times were too slow and she didn't want me to not make the team. So she introduced me to shot put and discus, and that's when I just fell in love with it.
Becky's throws earned her a spot in the state championship last season, the first time the only known openly transgender athlete in West Virginia in any sport took a top prize.
Your teammates don't see a difference in your performance or your presence.
No, most of them are really kind. They support me all the way. It's just like being any other person on the sports team.
She may be embraced by some teammates, but she's been protested by other athletes and targeted by state lawmakers, who in 2021 passed a law banning Becky and other transgender girls from girls' sports. Becky and her parents sued the state, and a federal appeals court blocked the law as discrimination on the basis of sex under Title IX, the landmark civil rights law meant to guarantee equal opportunities for women and girls in education and school sports.
Why did you guys bring this lawsuit?
As a parent, I wanted her to do what she wanted to do, and I wanted her to be happy and be with her friends, but I also knew the importance of sports for a lifelong foundation.
Becky, who is openly identified as a girl since 3rd grade, is among the estimated 122,000 transgender American teens who participate in high school sports. That's just over 1% of the more than 8 million teenage student athletes nationwide.
If boys are allowed to play in girls' sports, what we know is they will take the place of biological females on these teams and take away their opportunities to be successful later in life.
West Virginia Attorney General John McCuskey says he harbors no animus toward Becky, but that banning trans athletes from girls' sports is essential for safety and fairness.
Becky is bigger and stronger and faster than the females that she's competing against.
The American College of Sports Medicine says studies have shown testosterone produced during male puberty does lead to more muscle mass, larger hearts and lungs, greater body height, and longer limbs for boys and men. But before puberty, research shows sex differences in athletic performance are minimal. Becky says she's never undergone male puberty thanks to puberty-blocking medication and has no physiological advantage over her peers.
She has testosterone from her adrenal glands, just like every female out there. That's the only testosterone she has. She's actually not the biggest person on her team. There's people taller than her. There's people shorter than her. She's just an average female teenager.
Sports should be kept. Girls play against girls and guys play against guys. That's just
Sabrina Shriver competed against Becky and says she was made uncomfortable in the locker room and on the field. And in 2024 joined 4 other teammates in a silent protest during an 8th grade track meet. The group spoke out in defense of a ban.
This is not right in a situation that is eventually going to kill women's sports forever.
What made you uncomfortable?
I just didn't think it was right. So it was just, I don't know, we kind of all just felt uncomfortable and we didn't want any part of it.
Sabrina says she later quit the track team over Becky's participation in the league. Her views on trans athletes are not an outlier, as 69% of Americans say trans girls should only be allowed to play on boys' teams.
We are really starting to confuse, I think, in the athletic fields, the differences between gender and sex.
What is the solution for student athletes like Becky? Is it to just have them play in the boys' league? Is that fair and safe for them?
Yes.
That's where this should end up.
Yeah. I don't mean to be flippant, but that was a fairly simple question, and my answer is yes.
The U.S. Olympic Committee, the NCAA, and 29 states ban transgender girls and women from competing on teams consistent with their gender identity. 21 states do not, including California and New York, which have laws explicitly allowing trans athletes to compete.
Why not just play with the boys' team?
Because it would go against who I am. I've been a girl forever, and playing on the guys' team is going backwards.
And her mom insists Becky's hormone levels prove she's just like any other girl.
If they look at the medical records of individuals, like the Olympic Committee, testing people, they test for other performance-enhancing medications or drugs that their athletes take. So if we can look at those levels, let's look at her level.
Opponents say that's just not practical, and now they're looking to the U.S. Supreme Court to hold the line and reinstate West Virginia's ban as drawing a permissible sex-based distinction in sports.
What would it mean now if it was allowed to be enforced?
I would be devastated because track is something I enjoy so much. It's where I met a lot of my friends and I make most of my memories.
A lot of trans people are afraid of the spotlight right now for understandable reasons. Why aren't you?
Because I know someone has to do it. Someone has to do this for all of us.
Our thanks to Devin for that. The case will be argued tomorrow at the Supreme Court, and a decision will come by the end of June. Still ahead, after losing his parents in a tragic plane crash last year, a U.S. figure skater honors his parents with one Olympic achievement. And the road to the Super Bowl is becoming clearer. ESPN's Herm Edwards is here to dish on the playoffs. An unexpected trip back to Earth for a group of astronauts. The missing text now under President Trump's portrait at the Smithsonian. And there's a new Barbie on the block, and she's championing representation. These stories and more in tonight's Rundown. NASA plans to end a mission to the International Space Station early due to a medical situation involving one of the astronauts aboard the station. One of the astronauts who will be returning early took to LinkedIn to say that everyone on board is stable and safe, saying in part that the decision is to allow the right medical evaluations to happen on the ground where the full range of diagnostic capability exists. Mattel is introducing its first Barbie with autism. The new doll adds to their Fashionistas collection, which champions representation and includes Barbies with Down syndrome, vitiligo, and a blind Barbie. Mattel says the Barbie with autism was developed over 18 months in partnership with the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, with designs to reflect how some with autism may experience the world. The doll comes with accessories like noise-canceling headphones and a fidgety toy. The doll is now available at select major retailers. Muhammad Ali is being honored with a commemorative U.S. postage stamp. The stamp will recognize the legacy of one of the most famous and influential boxers of all time. The three-time heavyweight champion is remembered not only for his dominance in the ring, but also for his activism and humanitarianism outside of the ring that made him a global icon. The Muhammad Ali Forever stamp will debut Thursday in Louisville, Kentucky, his hometown. The 22 million stamps that have been printed will be available while supplies last. References to President Trump's 2 impeachments have been removed from his photo portrait display at the Smithsonian's National Portrait Gallery. This is the latest apparent change at the collection of museums he is accused of bias as he asserts his influence over how U.S. history is documented. The text was part of the museum's American Presidents exhibition. The description had been placed alongside a photograph of Trump taken during his first term in office. Now a different photo appears without any accompanying text block. Figure skater Maxim Naumov has been named to the 2026 U.S. Olympic team 1 year after losing both of his parents in a plane crash. His parents were among the figure skaters and coaches who died when an American Airlines flight collided with a U.S. Army helicopter outside Washington, D.C. back in January of 2025. As he awaited the results of his short programs, he held up a photo of himself and his parents to honor their memory. The 83rd Annual Golden Globe Awards wrapped up last night, celebrating the best in film, television, and for the first time ever, podcasts, where Amy Poehler took home the award for her podcast, Good Hang. Hamnet won Best Picture Drama, while One Battle After Another took home the Best Comedy or Musical prize. Grammy-nominated singer Tiana Taylor and actor Timothée Chalamet both took home their first Globes win. The biggest winners of the night, One Battle After Another and Adolescence, with 4 wins each. The award season continues next week when the Oscar noms are announced right here on ABC News Live and Good Morning America. He says he's on air more than just about any other person, and as a result, he says that makes him a lightning rod for criticism at times. We wanted to get to know Stephen A. Smith, the sportscaster, the talk show host, and the person. Here's a short clip of our All Access special. Biggest regret?
Biggest regret? Wow. That I'm not married.
Will you ever get married?
Yes, but I'm not married. My biggest regret is that I had not 1 but 2 daughters out of wedlock. It is the only thing that my mother has ever expressed shame about. She was incredibly, incredibly disappointed in me for that happening. And she made me promise that the one thing that I would be is a great father. She said, you want to make it up to me? You be the best father that you can possibly be, and you make sure you're not like your father was.
You can catch much more of the conversation streaming on Disney Plus and Hulu. The NFL divisional round is almost set. We have 1 game left in the wild card round as the road to the Super Bowl continues. And to help us break down the playoff picture in this week's edition of Hanging with Herm is none other than Coach Herm Edwards himself. Thank you so much, Coach, for joining us as always. Let's start off with the wild card games this past weekend. Chicago Bears came back from an 18-point deficit to beat their rival, the Green Bay Packers. They're just the 4th team in playoff history to win after trailing by 15 points or more entering the 4th quarter. So what happened? Did the Bears win, or did ultimately the Packers just fall apart?
No, the Bears won, and it's really all about Caleb Williams right now. Ben Johnson is his new coach who had came from Detroit, and you've watched this renaissance of a young quarterback that struggled last year to really all of a sudden make a 360 change in how he played and how this Bear team's playing. So they're a good football team. You're right, the Green Bay Packers are in their division, but it was one of those things. The Bears all season have come back in the fourth quarter to win games.
Last year's Super Bowl champions. I'm feeling kind of down about this. My Eagles, Philadelphia Eagles, were eliminated by the San Francisco 49ers, who lost a key player on their team in George Kittle to injury. What surprised you more, the Eagles losing or Niners winning despite their injuries?
No, I think the Niners have had an outstanding year, and Coach Shanahan has to be considered maybe one of the coaches of the year in the fact that all these players have been injured from San Francisco, but they found a way to continue to win. They probably play in the toughest division, the NFC West, with Seattle obviously out there in the Rams. But for them to come in and beat Philadelphia in Philadelphia, that was quite a feat. But Philly has struggled offensively when you watch them. They don't have the mojo offensively, and it showed up again last night. In the fourth quarter especially, they had 6 possessions, and out of those 6, 3 of them, they went 3 and out.
Let's jump to tonight's game on ESPN between the Houston Texans and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Can Aaron Rodgers pull off some magic and lead the Steelers to the next round, or are the Texans, the defense there, just too good?
Well, you mentioned the defense. They're only giving up 17 points. They've sacked the quarterback 47 times, and they've hit him 210 times. So Aaron Rodgers is in Pittsburgh for this reason, to win playoff games. I'm not counting him out. They have to travel to Pittsburgh. That's a hard place to play in playoff competition. So I give the Steelers a chance with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, when he's standing up and he's upright, and if they don't hit him, they'll have a chance to win this game.
All right, looking ahead to the matchups already set in this weekend's divisional round, which games stick out to you the most?
Well, I think anytime you got a divisional round, I mean, it's kind of interesting because they're all good. I mean, once you get past that first round, this is a tournament, in my opinion, that on the AFC side and the NFC side, who's the best team? I don't think anybody has an answer for that. I think it's going to be very competitive every week. You're going to sit there and scratch your head and say, how did they pull this off? I think the Buffalo Bills, I think if you're a Buffalo fan or just a Josh Allen fan, you're hoping that he can get through this because he's a tremendous player. I mean, he was Superman yesterday. I mean, it was unbelievable. He put the cape on and he said, "Come on, guys, I'm going to win a game for you." So I love watching him play.
You know, his shoulders have to be kind of tired today, carrying the whole team like that. Coach Hearn, we thank you so much. And that is our show for this hour. I'm Lindsay Davis. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thank you so much for streaming with us. Have a great night.